Hey, welcome back to Metal and Forge. It's episode 9. This is your host, Patrick Miller, joined by my co-host, Kent Lapp. How are you, Kent?
Fantastic. I guess, that's being optimistic. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving. You know what? After having a few days off, it'd be easier to have another one off. But at some
Yeah.
point, you got to go back to work.
Well, that's the first thing I was going to ask you about is tell me about Thanksgiving and the holidays. How are you feeling about this whole thing? Obviously,
Yeah, really
you enjoyed it. You want more of it.
Yeah, definitely enjoyed it. Do want more of it. And, the holidays have gotten better for us. Each one has sort of gotten better over the last few years, which has been great. They've always been good, but for some reason they've been sometimes hard. And I think maybe with, here's the truth of it is if your life is not exactly where it should be, or maybe you have some stuff that's not the best in your life, then you take time off for the holidays and then you have to face it when you could be getting distracted with work. And I think that sort of, I think that was happening for us a little bit. Me in particular,
Yeah.
and I'm talking like 10 years ago, in a different season of life. And so for whatever reason, we didn't always capitalize, I don't think, on the holidays the best that we could have. And it probably had something to do with the season that our kids were in too. But the last couple years, it started a few years ago, and then it was like incrementally better. Every year it seemed like they were better. Like, I think we just had the best Thanksgiving ever. And last year, I think we'd had the best one up until that point, And so I'm looking forward to Christmas, the Christmas season. But I kind of think maybe a little bit of it had to do with having a loss, of a father at a young age. And that kind of, even though you might not think of it specifically with some of those things, sometimes like implicitly it has a little bit of an effect. So, but no, I'm really grateful for the season we're in now with our family and stuff, because we really are enjoying the holidays and we look forward to it a lot. Thanksgiving is like Mariana's biggest week with Baked and Free. So she just goes super hard until Wednesday night. And so then she's stoked about sleeping in on Thanksgiving, having a few days off. Everyone's excited about it. So we had a really good time.
Awesome. It's funny because I know what you mean. There's kind of an ascendant enjoyment of the holidays as your kids get a little older each year. When they're 7, 8, or 9, that's probably more fun than when they're 2, 3, and 4 or whatever.
Yeah.
Then when they're 11, 12, 13, that's even more fun. 14, 15, 16, it keeps getting better. I feel like we've probably kind of crested that a little bit and maybe come off on the other side a little bit just because of the specific dynamics in our family. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and it was really great to have the older kids back home. So there's nobody prepares you for how great it is when your kids come back home after they've left the house. I had no idea how much I would look forward to having them all under one roof again. So that was awesome. I think having them be here for a relatively short amount of time, college break for Thanksgiving isn't as long, and our oldest daughter didn't take as much time off of work. So they were only here for about 3 days. Ben was here a little longer than that, but it was a little shorter time. And with the new baby, it just felt like we couldn't quite find our rhythm in terms of the normal routines that we have around Thanksgiving. So it was
interesting.
It was great. And it was great to see them enjoy the baby. It was great to have them back home. Like every part of it was amazing, but there was just something about the rhythm that felt a little off to me. And I think it was probably the dynamic of having a new baby, having older kids that are coming home for the holidays. And of course, my wife and I, our attention, is split now because we have to attend to the baby and tune into that. And there's less time to focus on the older kids. But yet you kind of feel some pressure to show up for them too, because, they've driven 6 or 7 or 8 hours to be here, and it's their, going home for the holidays. So you want to make that special. Probably felt that tension a little bit more this year than I would have predicted. But it also taught us some things about how we want to approach Christmas. We're all going to be in Florida over Christmas for a week.
Oh, cool.
So that'll be fun. And it gave
was
us some
curious
insights.
When you were saying that, I was curious how much that had to do with the stage of your kids, the older kids. Are you saying that like you almost have this sweet spot where they get on the other side of that as they get older? And if so, I was curious with your experience, how much of it had to do with your kids being in that kind of on the far end of the sweet spot? How much might have had to do with the little 6-month-old?
Yeah.
And how much might have had to do with just where you're at with, coming out of employment? And I mean, it's right here, right? I mean, it's happening right now.
Right now.
So was there any one of those in particular that was like the main driver, or was it just, you think, the combination?
I think it's probably a combination. I mean, it's the tension of being in the middle of everything right now, trying to build the good king, being done with my job, more importantly, being done with that paycheck, being on my own and having to make every dollar that we get, I have to go out and drag it home, which is, for someone who hasn't been in the entrepreneurial world for several decades, that's a new feeling. And it's, it's stressful. Like there's a constant, wolf at the door, if you will. And that you've been in this world a lot longer than I have. So, I think it's that. I think the tension of not being able to give the older kids and the baby everything that we would like to give them in terms of our attention.
Yeah,
probably
that makes
one
sense.
of the biggest challenges.
Okay. So if you didn't have the 6-month-old, then you would be able to focus on the other kids as sort of a unit, but they're just in such a different stage than the 6-month-old. Now you've sort of got 2 units.
Yeah. Well, ever since my, spiritual awakening 7 years ago, and the journey that my wife and I have been on, putting our life back together, our marriage back together, bringing our family through that, we got really, really close as a family unit, the 4 older kids and my wife and I. We have, an unbreakable bond that, we'll never forget the last 6-7 years together. There's an emergent ethic that comes out of that group. There's a very strong sense of, this is how we want to treat each other. This is the feeling we want to create in our home. This is the vibe. This is the ethic. This is the way. This is the way we want to be when we're together, and this is the way we want to orient ourselves in the world. And that sometimes, we try to make that explicit as much as possible, but a lot of it is just kind of an unspoken appreciation for an emergent ethic that kind of rose up, I would say, somewhat. I would say it was a result of intentional decisions that we made as parents, but it certainly is also something that we learned together as we grew. So that really tight-knit feeling, the baby comes bursting into that. And of course, everybody's thrilled about that, but it is different. And, it's demanding. And I think I was struck by, I just didn't feel like I quite reached around to everybody in the way I'd like to this Thanksgiving season.
Yeah, that is interesting to hear that. I guess, it makes sense. Do you think, the 6-month-old baby aside, do you think that there is sort of a tipping point with the age of your kids where you almost get on the far side of the sweet spot for Thanksgiving? Because I guess that was not something that was really on my radar. I guess I've sort of been thinking where it just gets better and better every year.
No, I think that's the right way to think about it. I don't think that there's a tipping point. I think that the specifics of having a baby this late in life and all of that is just a temporary shift in the pattern. And I think, I probably in 3 years we'll be at a much higher place than we would have been had we not had the baby. I think but it's just, and I don't even know if the kids really thought about it necessarily. I just, reflected on it as I don't feel like I quite was able to give what I normally would have given to the kids, older kids.
So if there is a tipping point, it's going to be much farther down the road where you're in an entirely different season of life, whereas maybe they're all basically married and they all have their own kids and they're starting to want to do their own things. But that's 20 years down the road, or 10 at least, right? Or 15 probably.
And I don't even necessarily see it as I don't expect a regression I expected an ever expanding delight in experiencing that dynamic, as it changes and grows throughout the year. Because it's always been that way since the kids were little. It's always the next stage. We always enjoyed every stage, but the next stage was just even more full and even more full of joy and better. And so we just I'd say we enjoyed every stage more than the last.
Yeah, same.
And, this dynamic now of having 4 older kids and then 1 baby, I think that will continue that trend. But this first year, it's just kind of been this like interruption of the norm, and everybody's trying to get used to it. And, our baby is a good baby, but a demanding baby. Like she's very, she likes when you pay attention to her. She's not cool just chilling in the shadows, for hours at a time. So, we've got our hands full. It's wonderful. So
that's great. Hey, let me ask you a personal question in the least personal way possible then. What I experienced with our 5 kids was a little bit of I affectionately refer to it as the hell zone after having a baby, because you no longer are basically inseparable from your wife. Like that baby takes precedent. Mm-hmm. Whatever your plans were, whatever you were about to do or were doing, that baby needs attention. There's varying degrees of needing attention, but the general rule is within the first 6 to 9 months, that baby's taking precedent over everything.
Yep.
And that was just always hard for me, because I just, I always liked the feeling of my wife and I being together and basically inseparable. And, well, I guess quite frankly, I sort of like the feeling of being the highest priority in her life. Mm-hmm. And she's definitely the highest priority in my life. And having a baby interrupts that. And it did every single time. There was no exception. Some babies are easier than others. Ari, our last one, was the hardest one. And that got so bad. I was sleeping in another bed for a little bit, and that had never happened before, just because she would not stop crying. So I'm just curious though, like in your stage now, having been through what you've been through in your marriage, and obviously you guys went through this really, like an awakening in your marriage where you guys were super close, super, bonded, and your intimacy was better than it had ever been. Also, is this having a baby and just this hell zone, is this just part of it? Like, are you having to deal with it also, and there's just no way around it?
Total train wreck. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
son of a gun.
Yeah. No, it is. It's pretty rough. I mean, it's funny because I'm also very busy building my business, and so I probably don't experience it maybe quite as, I don't know. Yes, I mean, our sex life has fallen off a cliff since the baby's born, and we're just starting to get that back in terms of, the baby. She turned 6 months old, and I would say over the last month or two, we're making some strides towards improving that. But I mean, totally. Obviously, the first month and a half, there's just nothing. But then, it's been a slow kind of rebound in intimacy and things like date night. And this is on me. I think there are ways to lead creating, opportunities for date night, even with a young baby. But I've been busy and I haven't done a lot of that. And I want to. I work, I've been transitioning out of this job into the business, working, both jobs essentially, while getting ready to kind of cut the cord. And it's been pretty demanding. So
I can see that.
I haven't invested in my marriage in the way that I'd like to, in the way that I intend to. Although I will say we have better tools now for navigating these waters too.
I could see that.
We have better language to talk about what we're experiencing. We don't let things build up the way that we used to. We address stuff more head on, and we're more direct about what we're feeling. We're honest about what we're experiencing. We don't avoid it, but I think we would both say it's been hard. That part of I would say we're somewhere between lovers and housemates, and day by day it pushes one side or the other. But having a baby just I don't know if there's a way to avoid that really, interruption of the dynamic. And I don't even look at it as bad per se. It's just
Right. It's part of it.
yeah, it's just a challenging time that you go through.
Yeah. I mean, you're literally bringing a new life into the world, and that's a very intense thing, and it probably should be as interruptive as it is. But the great thing is now you guys have proof of concept, because I do think this was maybe one thing that was, well, yeah, missing to the extent that we have it now. Like, you have experienced something that you now know is possible. And so as this baby gets older, you're both going to want to go back to what you had.
Yeah.
And you will.
Yes.
You will.
And beyond.
At some point you will. Yeah. And beyond. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. But that proof of concept thing is, I think, and I am pretty sure you guys have experienced kind of in some similar ways to, I feel like, what we're experiencing now, which is like, we never thought this could be this good.
Right.
Sex in particular, the marriage, all of it. So if we had a baby now, I'm sure we would go through that hell zone again, but we would know, like, hey, in a year or whatever time frame this is, we're going to work to getting back what we have now. So you have that at least.
Yeah, totally. No, I'm not worried about that. I'm not, thinking there's no part of my brain that's going, oh, geez, we've lost something that we can't get back or any of that. It's just this recognition that it's a season that we're going through, and, we'll be back and beyond where we were. The having a baby, and this is something I've been thinking about as we've had the baby, is having a baby is obviously to bring life into the world, but it also, I think God allows children, he creates children in our life to, teach us the things we need to know and help us become the kind of people that we need to become. And that has, becoming somebody who you're not today is always a challenging thing. And I think the kind of lack of control that we have over when we have children, it's not something, it's something we participate in, but it's not something that we ultimately control. And so when that happens, it's like, oh, like this is a gift from the divine. It's a gift from God. And his gifts are always meant to reveal something more of his love to us. And certainly Penelope has done that and does that. I think the challenge of having a child, especially at an older age, we're 48 and 45, and that is a new set of challenges, but those, it makes you face certain fears. It makes you face certain parts of yourself and double down on the personal growth, double down on stuff that perhaps I'd become lazy about. There's just it's kind of an eye-opening process to have a baby again, especially at this age.
Yeah. Well, that's how people around us are, right? Like people around you in different degrees of relationship have an impact on you, and there's no one closer to you than your wife. And then right outside of that kind of bracket is the kids. And especially your wife and kids, because you're all living in the same house. Yeah. I actually like that point about them having an impact on you and making you go through hard things in areas that are that are necessary in your life to continue to grow you as a person. I think that's partly why it's hard.
Yes. I think the idea of thinking of it as a mirror that's held up to reveal our shadows is a pretty helpful framework. And that's, it's humbling to come face to face with some of the things that are revealed in that mirror.
Yeah.
The mirror of your kids, the relationship that you have with your wife and your kids.
Yeah.
There's a truth that's revealed. It's fun, it's funny because the feminine, we talk sometimes about the dynamic of the masculine and the feminine, and how the masculine is much more, rigid and rational and logical and analytical, and the feminine is more flowing and changing, and there's movement, there's creativity, there's beauty, and all of that. It's just a different dynamic. But no matter how changing my wife is in her being, as she is in her feminine flow, no matter how changing she is, she just reveals this depth of divine truth to me about the nature of reality. There's something, even in her changing, even in her moving from this place to that, she reveals something to me. Sometimes I just laugh. I'm like, you are the truth. Like, there's just something, that is true that's revealed to her. And so you can try to turn away from that. You can try to avoid looking at that. And you talked about the idea of avoidance with the holidays back 10 years ago. It's like maybe the things in your life weren't the way that you wanted them to be. And so rather than sit with that in the quiet, relative quiet of the holiday, it was easier to work because then you can kind of avoid that. And I think in our marriage and in our family relationships, there's always that temptation to avoid what the mirror is showing us and not.
Right.
I think there's a verse in the Bible that talks about, the man who looks in a mirror and then turns away and forgets what he looks like. I think that's in James. Versus the one who, looks into the mirror, looks into the perfect law of love and lets it, burn away the dead wood. Yeah. It's like, that's the process I'm in right now. There's always more dead wood to be burned away.
Yeah. Hear that.
There was so much dead wood. I had so much dead wood in my life that the fire almost took me out. Like, it almost wiped me out completely. There was almost nothing left saving, but thank God there was something.
Yeah, or so it felt anyway, right?
Well, no, I think just honestly, like practically speaking, if I go through my life bit by bit, like, there was so little worth saving. There were some things, and here's an interesting little tidbit from our Thanksgiving holiday. Our older kids love looking at old family videos. So going back
ours too.
15 plus years, when they were little. So we did that when they were all home. We spent some time watching family videos. And one of the things that, as I was preparing, I was getting the videos ready for us to watch, I looked back at a time when I knew I was trapped in addictive behaviors to, pornography and sexual acting out and all kinds of perversion, and I had this hidden life that nobody knew anything about. So I look at those years through the lens of, what did I miss by running around like that and carving out this hidden life and needing to maintain that and all of that. And so looking back at those videos, I just, as I was sitting by myself preparing those videos, I wept with joy to see that there was a part of me that was worth saving, that there was a part of me that was not, that I was a good dad back then, despite all the stuff I was into and all the sin I was hiding. I could see a dad who was, deeply committed and attuned to his kids and was pouring into them in an intentional way. It made me glad to see that, because I think when you're on this side of it, it's easy to look back at the dark years as, did I waste those years, et cetera.
Right.
But it made me glad to see that there was some gold down there that became purified in the fire and didn't burn away with all the dead wood. So.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was deeper than I expected our little initial catch-up to go. Good. All right. Total change of subject here. Let's mix it up a bit. Talk about cars for a bit. I know you've had a Tesla. You no longer do. And the question...
I still do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I thought you sold it.
I tried to sell it twice over the last 5 years, and neither time it sold, and I'm glad it didn't. So I still have it.
Oh, okay. So this will be a good conversation. So what's the future of cars look like, and what should it look like in terms of the technology that drives us, that propels us? And right now, that seems like a battle between internal combustion engines that we've used for 100 plus years, or the emergent battery technology, or something that we haven't really looked into all that much, like hydrogen or natural gas, or perpetual motion machines or whatever. Do you think that battery cars like Teslas are going to be the prominent, the dominant fuel source, motive source in 50 years from now? And if so, why or why not?
Yeah, I think I would need to break this into two categories of timelines. One being sort of the next era, and I don't know what that should be, or maybe it is maybe something along the lines of the next 50 years. Probably, yeah, probably, because I do think these things tend to happen a little slower than we think. Like self-driving, that's taken longer than we thought it might have, and to go from, say, internal combustion engines to electric powered, getting down the road, that shift to go from one gas being dominant to electric, it may take longer. So yeah, I kind of like the 50-year timeline. That's really all I know enough to kind of speak about. Beyond that, I just don't know, and maybe no one does. I did hear in the last year or two that apparently someone had invented some kind of engine that operated on water, and the guy wound up mysteriously dead somehow. So that's sort of an interesting little thing that someone could look into. I did not look into it, don't know anything about it, but I am very bullish on electric, and it's the driving experience. It's when you drive a Tesla, it's like how driving was always meant to be, in my opinion. And look, I also think that there is maybe always, or even in the next 50 years, there is going to be a category for, a Porsche 911, a 69 Camaro, a Chevelle, like whatever, you name it. Some of these cars, they're not going away anytime soon, and they shouldn't. Like, there's a particular enjoyment that you can get from those cars that you can't get from an electric car. But in terms of the driving experience, safety, efficiency, convenience, a Tesla, and I don't know about other electric cars, but mine is a 2013. It's a Model S. It has a very small battery, 40 kilowatt hour battery. They don't even make them that small anymore. I've never been to a supercharger. I can't even use a supercharger in my car because the battery's too small. So it's only around town, 120-mile range. Never will take it on a road trip because I can't and don't care. Didn't need that ever. Got it in 2018 and have had it since. So that car's, what is that? That car's 11 years old. Mm-hmm. And it drives like it was manufactured last year. And that's not even a joke. I'm serious about that. That thing, there's no gas stations. There's no oil changes. When you're home, you plug it in. And when you want to drive it, you drive it. And then you plug it in again when you get home. And somehow my wife does have a really uncanny ability to always have the Sequoia on empty when I jump in to drive it. It happens pretty much every single time. And I hate gas stations.
Yeah.
I despise them because there's never a good time. It's always too hot, or it's raining, or it's way too cold. There's just never a good time to stop at a gas station. So just the convenience factor, the driving experience, the safety element, and then if you pair that with what Tesla's doing with the technology, with full self-driving and those types of things, I do think electric is the way of the future.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up because I knew you were a fan. I didn't realize you still had your Tesla, but I knew you loved it. And I love Elon Musk. I think, we could talk all night about what he's accomplishing and we wouldn't even scratch the surface. So I'm a definite fan there. I have a hard time with electric cars. I don't like them. And I have these questions about their sustainability and how much electric we can actually sustain on the grid, and with the fact that the units of energy required to manufacture an electric car along with its battery is greater than what the car will ever produce, so it's a net negative in terms of just units of carbon, specifically. And across a long enough timeline, something that's net negative in the energy space ceases to exist because it consumes more than it produces. And so that's not sustainable. But obviously they're having a moment, and there are upsides to them, some that you mentioned, although I don't know if any of them really overcomes the range anxiety. And again, your use case is different because you never need to go out of town with it. But and the reason I've been thinking about this is because my brother just bought a new Tesla, and I'm happy for him. He wanted it and he bought it. And a great friend of mine just bought a new Porsche Taycan S, I think, and I drove it a couple weeks ago, and it's amazing. Like it's a stunning vehicle, but there's something missing.
Hmm.
And you mentioned the
Is it
Porsche
electric?
911. Yeah, it's the Taycan's
Okay.
an electric. It's kind of the equivalent, I would say. It's Porsche's answer to Tesla's Model S.
I see.
So basically, and therein lies a little bit of the rub, is that they're all kind of the same. There's not. It's really hard to differentiate when you have a kind of skateboard frame with a battery bolted to it and a body plopped on top, electric motor at each corner, skateboard frame with a battery, and then some box on top, some
Yep.
passenger compartment on top. And they're great cars from a technical standpoint, but I'm in this place, I think, of enjoying the experience of life, maybe not always in the most sterile, over-engineered way possible. And there's certain analog experiences that I covet, that I like. And something can be technically excellent and leave me kind of meh about it. There, lack of soul, lack of, some X factor, lack of the je ne sais quoi of having something really, having a really unique experience or transcendent experience, to really stretch the language here talking about cars. But yeah, I'm just curious, like, do you see that tension too? And you mentioned, I guess, that there would always be a special place in the market for cars that are experiential first, the Porsche 911, the 60s muscle cars and all that. It just feels a little bit like we've made transportation another appliance, and it's like buying a microwave, kind of. It's like, well, okay.
Well, we definitely have, but that started way before Tesla. That started when they took the drugs out of designing vehicles.
No question. Yeah.
So that started in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
Yep.
So that was way before Tesla. I totally agree with that. The other thing is that you're right, that the current power grid is nowhere close. Like if we all went electric tomorrow, we're fucked.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
It does not work. We're not even close. I mean, Patrick, we're still sending electricity to people's homes in physical wires that we hang alongside the road and prop up with poles that you can drive into.
Yeah,
this is insane.
Positively third world.
It's absolutely third world. Like all this stuff should be underground.
Yeah.
But it's better than not having it. I'll give you that. And look, we're pretty good in this country about getting something up quick, so I'm happy about that. But your point stands that we are not ready for 70% of the vehicles in this country to be electric. It would not even work right now.
I'll just throw in there, I don't foresee a path to where it could, like, even if we started producing power plants today and we produced, let's say we got 25 power plants and we started digging right now, which, it takes years for a power plant to get approved, much less 25 of them. And we're not building new power plants at any scale. We don't have any current efforts underway to massively upgrade the grid. I don't see a 30-year future in which we do that, where we even if we started tomorrow, that we'd be able to build out the power grid in such a way that it would sustain, 80% of the consumer vehicles being battery.
I see your point on that.
Started right now. I don't think we get there.
I don't disagree with that. So that would be a bottleneck, but I guess I was not thinking so much about all the way down the supply chain quite like that. But you are right about that. However, I will say on going long distance, the more supercharger stations get in, like, there's Tesla supercharger banks at Buc-ee's now, or at least the one in Tennessee or the two in Tennessee, out East Tennessee, that we drove by last summer. So when more and more of those supercharger stations will go in, and what happens is when you drive across country in a Tesla, which you cannot in mine. I mean, they don't make them with that small of a range anymore, but most of them now have 250, 300 mile ranges, some even more than that. It will tell you, where exactly you're going to stop along your way. and then it does not fill you to full charge when you go to a supercharger station. It fills you just enough. And maybe, did I say this on the podcast recently, or was it offline with Austin? Maybe it was offline, where Elon explained the battery charging thing better than I'd ever heard it before, which is basically the first half of the battery charges way faster than the second half of the battery. And if you picture pulling into a parking lot that's completely empty, you pull in, you park right away. It's super easy. But when you pull into a parking lot that's 70, 80% full, you got to drive around before you find a parking spot, and then you can park. That's how it is when these energy units come into a battery cell. When the battery's empty, they find a unit really quickly to go into and store your energy there. But when the battery's 80% full, these units have to go around looking for empty cells to fill. And so it knows how to get you from, along your various points in your journey the fastest. So that technology is going to continue to improve. But the bigger point that I wanted to make is I was not aware that Teslas are a net negative on energy consumption to get them produced for the lifetime of the car. But what I was aware of was that my Tesla is not more advantageous to the overall impact on at least finite raw materials on the earth or wherever they're going to wind up getting them from. My Tesla is not a net positive on that impact until 120,000 miles.
Yeah, and you're probably about there.
I'm past that. I'm like 155 or 160 now. So, but after that though, you are. So I don't know if that's changed or if my data is old or whatever. But my understanding was over the course of its lifetime, a Tesla would actually be advantageous to raw materials. They're just not until 120,000 miles. However, on that 120,000 miles, though, what you're not doing in a city is you're not emitting smoke. And so, there is still a net positive there. But I do feel like this is shifting a little bit. It felt to me like however long Tesla's been in business, it felt like the first half of that time was more about like you're buying a Tesla because you want to be better on the environment. And the second half of that time is less talk about that. Like, I'm all for being better on the environment, but that's not why I bought the Tesla. And to your point about, cookie cutter microwave technology type stuff, the thing is this going to come down to the people's individual preference? Because I love muscle cars as much as the next person. But driving that Tesla brings me joy, and there's just not a better way to say it. And the two times that I've tried to sell it, I've been glad that it didn't sell, because it's not only easy to drive, but it's fun to drive. And it's just a phenomenal driving experience. So I'm a big fan. But for people there's always going to be those people that are going to want to fire that thing up and go for it and have no electronics. It's just, those people are eventually going to die.
Yeah. Well, although I will say that my kids' generation, like my older kids, my sons in particular, there's a definite appreciation, and it's not just them. It is a cultural thing. I don't know how widespread, but I see it amongst their friends for sure. But a real nostalgia and preference for, things that have a more analog kind of experience, or something that's, a throwback to at least the 90s, let's say. There's kind of a nostalgia that it feels like it runs deeper. And I almost see it as part of this overall shift. There's a shift, politically, a shift to the right amongst young men pretty significantly. And part of that almost seems like also a shift towards more traditional aesthetics and consumer choices. I don't know how widespread that is, or if that will continue as this generation ages. But there does seem among the young people to be, it's not just my generation dying off. I'd say my kids' generation are even more enthused about 5-speed cars, internal combustion engines. It's the old LP versus CD argument, I guess, or LP versus streaming.
Yeah, no, and I see that argument. I get that. I'm not surprised to hear it. I resonate with it for sure. It's just right now you have the luxury of preference. And what we're talking about is, where is this thing going? And to me, it's going electric. It's going automated. which I think is going to be an incredibly good step for safety. And because it's just not hard to beat a 21-year-old looking down at his phone when he's driving around the city, who's never driven a tractor in their life, or anything other than the vehicle they just jumped in and started rocketing down the road. So I just don't think it's hard to beat that.
Yeah. So another kind of totally unrelated but similar kind of trend, you know, in terms of engineering all of the foibles out of something to make it better, and then perhaps losing something deeply human in the experience. The other technology that has been on my radar recently, and I would actually, I'll go on record as making a prediction that we'll see a return in music to less use of auto-tune technology. So auto-tune came out in 1997, which it, you know, pitch corrects an artist's voice on the fly. And so pretty much every performance and every recorded music that you hear, there's been auto-tune applied, you know, since 97. That's been increasingly dominant to the point where it's pretty much universal now. But I bet we'll see people clamoring for non-auto-tuned music as part of this shift that I'm describing to more analog experiences. So something that is objectively worse, but more human.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, you are on record now because you said you're on record. That's going to be interesting. See, I don't know what I think about that, but the one thing that I do know is, personally, I feel like concerts are overrated. Now, it depends what seat you're at in the concert, and it depends what concert you're at.
Depends a lot on the artist.
It depends a lot on the artist. That probably the most on the artist, but it also depends, I think, heavily on where you're seated. I think that makes a big difference, and I personally think that role stands for any live sporting event of any kind. But what I'm driving at with the concert thing is, you know, we do not go to concerts very quickly, partly because the music's not that good.
Yeah.
Which sort of drives against the point that you're making. So how would I feel about listening to music that did not have auto-tune but was a more human experience? I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I hadn't seen that coming.
I think
I'm not sure if I want it.
Well, I think if you would experience it, you would go, this is what I've been missing. Like, there's a realness to it. There's an authenticity to it that's, even though it's less perfect technically, it's just better in you know, a lot of ways that are subjective rather than purely objective. And I just see this, I see culture wearying of the preeminence of objectivity and clamoring for the kind of relatively human experience of the subjective foibles and challenges of, you know, things that aren't technically perfect, but maybe more human.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd have to hear some music that's like that, because it really wouldn't be like a concert, because you could still have, if it's an album, you probably still record it in studio and you had the best technology and the best guitar player around and that type of thing. But then without the auto-tune. So I don't feel like I understand what the difference would be enough to have an opinion on it.
I mean, go back and listen to the Farm Aid concert in, you know, when was that? Late 60s? You know, when, you know, these guys were rocking the stadium in a way that, and people got into it in a way that is just, to your point, concerts aren't what they used to be. And you can, even on YouTube, you can go watch that and you can experience something that you just know is not ever, like, you're not going to experience that in a modern day concert. It just doesn't, there's something missing. There's something not there. You know, when Queen is up there, Freddie Mercury's up there prancing around, there's just something visceral about it that it just, like, it gets you involved at a heart level that is largely missing in modern, I would say, performances and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Back to the concert experience, because I love I'm interested in this. I know different people would prefer different concert settings as their ideal setting. So some people would love the smaller, intimate settings. Some people love a concert at a club, and then other people love the energy of an arena or stadium show, which is a very different experience than an intimate, library kind of concert. What do you like best?
Yeah, the ideal for me would be the Ryman. So
Okay.
if Jelly Roll came back and played through his Witsit Chapel album at the Ryman, I would pay almost anything that needs to be paid to go to that live at the Ryman, the Witsit Chapel album. If Jelly Roll is going to come through Nashville and play at Bridgestone Arena, I'm not going to go. So for I think both Marianne and I, like the Ryman would be the sweet spot. We were, the Bridgestone arenas, the places where only Taylor Swift is going to play, or Taylor Swift only now plays at the big stuff from what I can tell. Look, if there was a Woodstock and it was an outdoor thing and it was the right thing, that's like a stadium experience, but a little bit different. I'd be interested in experiencing that probably.
Yeah.
But no, I think like the Ryman. I don't know. I think it's like a couple thousand people. I don't know what it is, 2,000 or 3,000.
Yeah, 3,000 comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is one of the best concert venues in the world, in my opinion. We saw Sturgill Simpson there, and that was an unforgettable moment.
You saw Sturgill Simpson at the Ryman?
Yeah.
What was he playing?
He played Sailor's Guide to Earth and some other stuff too. But yeah, that was epic.
Wow. Yeah, that's up our alley.
Yeah, I want to go out and see Sturgill again. I've seen him 3 or 4 times, and he is one of those artists that I'll road trip to go hear him. There's really nobody else in that category that I know of. So,
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of concerts I haven't been to, but one cool concert experience I had was for, have you ever been to a concert where you've never been exposed to that genre of music before?
No.
That was a new experience for me. I went to I guess you would say metal concert at a club in Nashville a couple years ago. It was super punk rock, super, not the vibe that I normally would go for. But being in that club and hearing that band and trying to remember the name of the band. Is there a metal band named Chevelle or something like that comes to mind? Yeah, rock band Chevelle. I feel like maybe that was it. I don't remember. I have to look at the list of albums before I'll say for sure. And I forget who the other band was. But I was in there. A friend took me, and I still don't listen to metal really with any regularity. But I was like, holy crap! Like I get it. Like I get what this is about, and I got it at a really visceral level, and I was like, "This freaking rocks! Like this is great," And it was just there was something really profound about being there, and the lights and the whole thing, with the sound that you just feel in your chest, and you experience it in a very visceral way. And I'm like, "Hell yes! Like I could. This is awesome." And it didn't translate into me becoming a listener of that kind of music, but I just got it. I got why people love that, and I think concerts can do that.
Yeah, they can. Another one that I really enjoyed is the band Perry, who you don't ever think about anymore, but the band Perry played at the Basement East in East Nashville, probably back in like 2017 or 2018, and me and 2 guys went, and we were standing like right on the stage, and I don't know how many people, 500. I mean, not that many people were in there, but that was a lot of fun. So the smaller, more intimate kind of settings are preferable for us.
Yeah, totally. Circling back to this kind of conversation about electric cars, internal combustion cars and all that, one of the segues that I wanted to jump off there was about Jaguar's rebrand. Have you seen the rebrand controversy for Jaguar?
A little bit.
And you're a marketing branding guy. I mean, what do you think?
Okay. I don't know that I've looked at it enough to have a strong opinion. my understanding is that they went through a little bit of a rebrand that was sort of modern, woke, LGBTQ friendly, kind of inclusive, sort of DEI vibey.
Yeah.
Almost Chat GPT vibey a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if you put into Gemini at Google and was like, what should the new Jaguar branding be?
Yeah.
It would be what Gemini would spit out, is sort of my perception of it. You know, what do I think about that? I think it's too late. Like, this is not where we are anymore.
That is exactly right.
Yep.
That's the key.
This is about 7 years late.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry you guys didn't know that. And I can understand why you don't know that, sort of. But also not really, because this is your job, and I would have to think your marketing budget is ginormous, and you would have the data, you know, and you would stay up to date on this stuff. But also I understand that's not really how it works in a huge corporation like that, because you have layers of management, and by the time it gets down to the people doing the rebranding, you have so much bullshit involved, you don't even really know which way is up. And then you think this is where society's at, and it's just not anymore. So that was, I guess, the biggest thought that I had with it is like, they're too late and they don't even know it.
Yeah, I know. There's one caveat to all this, and that is that in this world, like, there's really no such thing as bad publicity. And they've certainly got a lot of publicity. You know, that if they had pulled off a moderately good rebrand, their views of their video would be less than 1/4 of where they are today.
It's true. Yeah,
right. And so
I agree with that.
How do you measure the impact of that? In an attention economy, it's easy to make the argument that there is no such thing as bad publicity. And so that's a caveat. They might be better off than I think they are. Because I'm with you. I think they totally, you know, skated to where the puck is no longer. And, you know, they're about 5 years behind. And I think the reason for that are the reasons you said, but also the people who are so focused on the woke kind of revolution are in an echo chamber. They genuinely didn't know that this is going to happen. They didn't see this shift happening because they're in such a powerful echo chamber.
That's what I think. And, you know, there's this, I guess, very small outside chance where they're actually playing 4D chess on us, and they are also aware that, you know, all PR is good PR. There's no such thing as bad PR, which I tend to agree with, because here we are talking about them. And so, but I doubt it. I doubt that's what they actually intended, because if that was what they actually intended, then they would be faking the DEI all-inclusive woke stuff, and that sucks, you know.
Yeah,
like that's not right to fake that stuff, and to fake that you're all in on that just to get more buyers, you know. So I doubt that's what actually happened. My guess is they actually thought this was going to hit, and they just didn't realize that they're too late.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. It kind of reminds me of the Bud Light controversy, you know, and you know, it'd be interesting to do the analysis and see, you know, what is it, 2 or 3 years now down the road since the transgender controversy? It'd be interesting to try to analyze and see whether that was a net positive or net negative for Bud Light. I would say a year and a half ago, you'd have said definitely a net negative, but I've heard their sales have rebounded. I don't know where they're at now, but I don't know. It wouldn't be shocking if you did the analysis and it came out that maybe it was a net positive in terms of more eyeballs, more attention, more, you know, brand mentions, etc. But you know, Jaguar still at the end of the day has to deliver a product that moves people. And whether they are playing 4D chess or not, that'll only be revealed if, you know, the product that comes out is actually stunning.
That's right.
You know, that's, and from what I've seen, there were some designs leaked. And it's interesting because some of the kind of woke catchphrases and little pithy little phrases that they threw out there as part of the rebrand were copy nothing, delete ordinary, and copy nothing, I think were the two of the
really
which,
and they're copying everything.
It's like, okay, I guarantee you're going to roll out some kind of, you know, electric skateboard with motors at each wheel with a box on top of it that's going to be, you know, 80% the same as every other car in that category that's coming out as an EV. It's
and send all your messaging through a DEI filter. That's as copied as you can possibly get.
Exactly. And the director of marketing, when he was doing his little spiel, he took pains to mention that they have something like 15 DEI initiatives at Jaguar, and listed some of the 15. And, it's a very strange misdirection of resources and attention, for a car company.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see where that goes. The design that I saw leaked is bold, but just incoherent. It's this kind of muscular Aston Martin kind of inspired thing, but then very brutish and kind of brutalist, and then presented in Barbie pink. So it's just kind of incoherent. And Jaguar used to make some of the most beautiful, sensual cars on the market.
Oh, no doubt about it. But the thing is look, marketing is very important, messaging is very important, but the most important thing about the whole thing is the product. So, I think a lot of this is going to come down to the product that they put out then, and is that going to sell or not? The Bud Light thing would be interesting. It would actually be very interesting to know, is Bud Light back to where they were or below or actually above before their controversy? It also would not shock me if they were actually above it. But the thing is you have to notice that they took some very critical, actionable, like tangible steps to reverse that thing. The CEO publicly made a statement, basically sort of denouncing / retracting. Then they went to the UFC and became a big sponsor in the UFC. The biggest podcast in the world Joe is talking about how, hey, the CEO is actually a very cool guy. They made a mistake. He comes out. So now Joe's basically endorsing him.
Yep.
Shane Gillis, one of the biggest comedians in the entire world, is endorsed. He's been drinking Bud Light forever and continued through that thing. And then you have Dana White, the owner of the UFC, or CEO, publicly making statements about how Bud Light, they screwed up. They know they screwed up. The CEO is a very cool guy. We're friends. You have some of the biggest communication mediums out there, some of the biggest personalities out there running cover for Bud Light.
Yep.
And it was a ginormous brand to begin with. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're just fine, if they've come back to their levels, or maybe even risen above. But it's a real gamble because, and maybe this doesn't even hurt Jaguar sales, but if it does, you're going to have to actually follow some steps here to get the trust back.
Well, it'd be hard to hurt the sales a lot. Their sales were down to 63,000 units last year, so they've basically gone to nothing. So it would be hard to go down from there.
Wow, 63,000 units. Globally or in America?
I think that's a global number, but I'm not 100% sure.
Interesting.
But they've been in decline for some time, just in terms of...
Okay. Well, I mean, look, if they're throwing a Hail Mary, you can't hate them for it.
Yeah.
Maybe they got a little desperate, which would actually make sense.
But the crazy thing is, if you had read the copy nothing, create exuberant, live vivid, and delete ordinary. I mean, just platitudes. But
yeah,
they missed such an opportunity to do something great. If they'd have seen where the culture's going, where there's this longing for, real kind of visceral human experiences. Like, they're a brand that would have been teed up precisely to deliver that.
You're right.
And, they might have just really screwed the pooch here, but...
You're right. And, this ties in with the electric gas thing also, because what it seems like to me is like, there's always going to be a category for Imogene and Willie jeans, this jean shop in Nashville. Mm-hmm. But I have to imagine they're selling a tiny sliver. They own a tiny sliver of the jean market just in Nashville, and then that sliver gets even smaller when you overlay that on a national scale. So, but they have a great business and their sales might even be growing, and there's always going to be people that want their jeans, but it's not going to be mass market. It could be that combustion engines are eventually the Imogene and Willies of the jean world.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad way to think about it. That's right. And just for those who don't know, Imogene and Willie is kind of a smaller craft conveyor of fine raw denim selvage jeans, $200, $300, $400 a piece. Yeah, and that's going to be a pretty small category. So there's kind of a luxury experience brand, and maybe that's what internal combustion engines will be. But when we were talking about Jaguar, this idea came to me that I wanted to kind of run by you, which is the idea of the decline of sensuality in our culture. I used the word sensual to describe earlier Jaguars, and I pointed out a similar directional move with music, with the auto tune. It's the same part of the same trend of engineering all of the experience out of the appliances that we now call cars. And obviously the obvious thing to talk about is the decline of sensuality in marriage and in the feminine in our culture. And I've been thinking about what causes that decline, or what's caused it to decline. And there's been a replacement of it. I mean, the decline of true sensuality and the fear of sensuality is part of what creates the vacuum for things like pornography to flourish. And I just see a kind of dehumanizing impulse in taking technology to the nth degree in terms of engineering all of the human experience out of everything, essentially. And I wonder how much and in what ways that's related to the general decline of sensuality in our sex, in our culture, in our marriages, and in our perceptions. I mean, and if you think about, and when I talk about the cultural differences, I guess what I want to set up a little bit is, the difference between, let's say, European culture, Western European culture, and American culture. Where in Western Europe, it may be more common for people to sit around at night, late dinner, drinking a glass of wine, laughing with friends, maybe sitting on the coast of the Mediterranean or sitting in the south of France somewhere, whatever. There's kind of a sensual experience that they're participating in that's not a part of our Western America, or of our American life, I would say, or at least it's a much smaller part of our life. And I think we're poorer for it. And I've wondered what has caused that. Why have we removed true sensuality and true beauty? Why have we denigrated that and made, created this space, this vacuum where, it's just OnlyFans and pornography and cheap alternatives to the real thing, and kind of relatively boring, mundane, sterile, brutalist, drop ceilings and fluorescent lights and, just ugly and soulless, from one end of town to the other. Like we've just engineered out the beauty and the sensuality out of our lives and out of our culture and out of our buildings and out of our music and out of our cars and out of our books. Like there's just this flattening of everything. And it grieves me. Like I am probably more attuned to the loss of that than the average person is. But I mean, that's a profound loss. And it's causal to the epidemic of, pornography-addled men who are like, we can't shut down that impulse for beauty in us. And it shouldn't be shut down. We're made in the image of God. And so to say that we have a hunger for and a ability to produce beauty is obvious. And, the fact that we've just turned a blind eye to it and engineered it out of our culture at every level to some degree or other is a loss that is, it's greater loss than almost any that I could tell you about as an alternative. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, and how do you experience that?
This is a big deal. And you set this up really, really well. And actually, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and we've been talking about it a little bit, Marianne and I. Not so much in what's going on culturally and what exactly you're talking about, but I can tell you why I think it's happening. I think why it's happening is because sensuality leads us to God. I think it's
Yes.
part of removing God from our life. I think
Yes.
it's part of removing God from the culture.
Mm-hmm.
There is when you are in the most when you and because we're talking about sensuality, when you and your wife are together in a way that you are most alive, I think it is like you're both stepping into an energy field, and that energy field is connecting you, but that energy field is coming from God. And
Yes.
it's part of his design. It's part of the design. It's part of his design. And I think it's part of what the Bible's talking about with this threefold cord that it talks about. The threefold cord is not easily broken. And I think when it's talking about in the Bible, it's explicitly talking about it as a husband and a wife in God, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, I think that analogy probably worked best for their understanding of language at that point. But to me, I don't sail much. I don't use many knots, or, I don't even know how to braid hair. So it's a little bit lost on me, but this is solely from anecdotal experience is it just feels to me like when we are together, when we are at our most sensual, awakened state, it is very much like we are both stepping into this force field that's coming down from above, and that is bonding us together. And there is an energy there. So I think that why is sensuality being removed from the culture? Why is it happening? I just think it's the drift, and where is the drift coming from? I mean, I also happen to believe that there's good and there's evil, in the world, and the evil is always trying to make less good in the world, and ultimately the good will overtake the evil, and there will only be good. But right now, you have the evil doing whatever it can, and it will infect every little place that it can. And we were just talking about this, man. This is so spot on, because for whatever reason, I also think that evil likes to focus on, well, look, it's going to do its thing wherever it can. Okay. So that's just a thing, but why move a person if you can move a culture? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get your sort of, we were talking about this in the, I think in this exact sort of setting about sensuality and sexuality, etc. If you can get into the culture, and then what's the best way to get into the culture? It's, entertainment usually is like, that's kind of the big one. You would see this back in the Bible times. If you could get entertainment, you could influence culture, and today's no different. And when you see like a lot of how marriage is portrayed in Hollywood, how marriages are portrayed in Hollywood, how sex is portrayed, those types of things, it's actually cheapened quite a lot. And not cheapened as in like, it's half of what it could be. It's cheapened as in like, it's a different thing. It's not even pointing in the right direction. It's nowhere close. And I think that is part of sort of the infiltration of sort of this, I guess, evil, if you will, sort of nudging us in different directions, trying to get us less focused on the good. And I do think this area is, I kind of hate to say like under attack, because that kind of sounds more combative than maybe it needs to, or whatever. But that is what's happening, sort of. And then I think you wake up in 2024 and you realize, it's just, it kind of worked. it kind of worked because we're all sort of drifting away from this. Probably most of us have a don't even understand how a marriage relationship is even supposed, the good that can be there that you don't even know about, so you're not even working towards.
Yeah.
So
that's actually that's a big problem. The lack of a sufficient ideal that confronts us, that we don't even know
yes,
what it could look like.
But that's what we're talking about, right? Because that ideal has been sort of removed, and I just think so bringing it back to sensuality, there's something powerful about that there's something powerful about a purely feminine being in a relationship with a purely masculine, and or a whole, as in holistic whole,
Well integrated,
feminine and masculine. Everything is like that. There is negative and there is positive. There is up and there is down. There is hot and there is cold. There is left and there is right. There is north and there is, like, everything, even down to like our DNA level. And the masculine and feminine polarizations are no different. This is how everything is in society. But I just think that God is behind sensuality, and I think that's why it is being blunted, being masked, being overlooked, because I think you find God.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the right language to use to talk about it. And the way I've been thinking about it is relating to the verse that says the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. And the other verse is, and you will know the truth and the truth will set you free. So the fear that's described in that verse, where it says the fear of God, is something like an awe and a reverence. And if you think about the fear of God being the beginning of wisdom, if you think about wisdom as being an attunement of your life to the deepest patterns of reality, like an alignment of your life, and the Bible talks about obedience to the law of love, or to the law of God, that alignment with the patterns that govern reality at the highest level. In order for us to ascend in our consciousness such that we are able to perceive of those patterns and align our consciousness and our life to them in what would be wisdom, we need to be in awe. We need to be in reverence. And beauty is, the primary role of beauty is to produce awe. Right. And so you really can't be wise without beauty. Right. You can't be in a state of awe and reverence if there's not something that's awe-inducing. And that's one of the most profound roles that beauty plays in our life, is to produce a state of awe such that we become attuned to these higher patterns. And you touched on that a little bit when you were describing the intimacy between a man and a woman. And it's absolutely true that when you are in that place and the fire is burning, there's a holy fire that burns away your false perceptions. And when you see the unfolding glory revealed to you in the aspect of the divine that is reflected in the feminine fully alive, it updates your perceptions in such a way that you're wiser for it. It puts you in greater alignment to love. It transforms you. It transforms your perception and your consciousness, and you play the same but opposite role for her. And together, it's an ascension of consciousness, of spiritual attunement to love and to God, to that which is highest. So it's no wonder that the forces at work that would seek to dehumanize us would be interested in removing beauty from our culture. Yeah. But I am grieved by and want to call out the role that popular Christian culture plays in promulgating the destruction of beauty. There's been dampening down of beauty in our Christian culture as well as the wider non-Christian culture. And it's no surprise to me at all that the wider culture would seek to destroy beauty, because beauty is a judge in that it's beautiful. And so,
Yep.
it's something I'm not, and it beckons to me, but it's also a judge. It's an ideal. And you touched on the idea of, where are the marriages that we can lift up as an ideal and strive to be like and seek to grow into. But paintings do that too. Artwork, it's like there's something beautiful revealed that changes you when you encounter it. A beautiful sunset can do that. But there's just a profound way in which being exposed to beauty produces a psychological transformation, a state of awe, a state of reverence that puts you in touch with the patterns in the universe, the deepest of which is love. And if you strip beauty away, that apparatus is corrupted. You no longer have that path to wisdom, let's say. And there's a dehumanizing element to that, where people become more disconnected, marriages suffer, people, anxiety goes up, people are less connected to the truth of what is. And when Jesus said that you will know the truth and it will set you free, it's like the language reveals that you will encounter ultimate reality in a way that will liberate you. And there's no place that happens more profoundly than in a intimate relationship united with God. That's one of the most profound examples that you encounter reality in a way that liberates you. And so the fact that the church has been complicit in the destruction of beauty is just a kind of stunning and sad commentary. The way that we've not held up art for what it could be, the way that we've not held up aesthetics, the way that we've not held up sensuality, the way we've not held up true beauty in marriage, the way we just haven't held it up in architecture, in car design, in clothing design. We've basically said that there's a whole host of other values that are more important than beauty. Efficiency, comfort, just to name a few. There's these other things that we value more than beauty. In fact, beauty is so far down at the bottom, it's not even worth mentioning.
Yep.
And, you see that in the clothes that are popular. You see that in the buildings that get built. You drive down the interstate and you pull off any exit you want to, and it's just a post-apocalyptic hellscape of, gas stations and dry cleaning and, donut shops and whatever, neon lights, garish buildings, concrete, and it's dehumanizing.
Yep.
And destructive to the human psyche. I don't know how far back it goes in the church. I know part of it was amplified by the way that the purity culture became a driving force in the popular evangelical culture in the 80s and 90s. But I think it goes back much further than that, and possibly even to the Protestant Reformation, when there was an enormous de-emphasis of the role of Mary in our practice of faith. And I'm not making an argument for any specific practice. I don't know enough about the Catholic veneration of Mary to comment on it, but I do wonder if if de-emphasizing the role of the divine feminine in Mary didn't have some causal role to play in our destruction of femininity, in that even men are taking over, saying they can be women now. Total destruction of femininity, the depression of sensuality, the destruction of beauty across all of these domains. I do wonder, and Andrew Clavin makes that point in his book, Truth and Beauty, and I don't know that work, but I know that that's a claim he makes, that it stems from the Protestant Reformation and the de-emphasis of the divine feminine in Mary. So I don't know I don't know to what extent that's the case, and I don't know what to do about it if it is. But I do know that we have to bring back a godly vision of sensuality and beauty and art and an appreciation of it. And the impulse to tear it down is the same impulse that Cain had when he looked at his ideal. He could not bear to look at the ideal that was his brother Abel, and he chose to tear it down and put it in the ground rather than to be confronted by it. And that is all of our temptation, and it's what we're doing with beauty, art, and sensuality.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting thought about Mary's role in all of this. I had not ever thought of that, but I have been thinking in terms of, for what we're talking about, I think you have the enemy within and the enemy without. And the enemy within is what you're talking about within the church. And I think part of that motivation probably is just, if you can, I think they feel like they're removing some of the danger, because beauty is very dangerous.
That's right. That's right.
And so if you can remove more of the sensuality, if you can remove more of the beauty, if you can devalue, de-emphasize, cast a little bit of shade on it, make it seem a little dirty even, then you can maybe make it less dangerous. That is the probably the motivation there in quite a lot of the situations. And then I think the enemy without is, I just think I think it is indiscernible, the difference between woke and a religion. And
Right.
so that's just another way to say that to me, it looks like a religion, and it seems like a religion. I experience it in people as a religion, and that is the enemy without. And what do I mean by that? Am I just being a bigot? Am I just being a white cis male or whatever? It's throwing shade around. Well, no, I mean, it is, saying that men can be women, women can be men. You can, everything is about power dynamics. It's not about masculine and feminine. It's about who has the power. It's about what color people are. It's all the identity stuff. And I don't care if a man becomes a woman, to be quite honest with you. And I don't even care if a woman becomes a man. I don't care if two men are together, and I don't care if two women are together. It would be almost impossible for me to care less. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is co-opting the narrative and forcing it on everyone, and making us all think that, basically glorifying it, taking this experience that might be just fine for an adult to have, from a libertarian's point of view, to have the right to go do whatever they want as long as it's not harming anyone. And it moves from that to, this is what we should all think. This is what we should all believe. Let us tell you. And that I think they also have a vested interest in removing beauty, because if you look at what the woke religion is saying, a lot of it is actually sort of directly opposed to beauty,
100%. 100%.
And sensuality and these things we're talking about. So I see what you're seeing, and I see those two, the enemy within and the enemy without.
Yeah. Well, the woke progressives are having a crisis because we're now in a post-nihilistic culture. We're no, and you can point to the re-election of Donald Trump, but there's other indicators that we're post-nihilistic now. You look at the resurgence of the band Creed, for example. There's bands that are earnest and that sing about transcendent themes are all of a sudden, having a resurgence in our culture. There's a growing number of Bible sales. I think Bible sales are up 20% or something like that, 12% maybe, pretty significant amount. There's the kind of story or lack of story that the postmodern experiment was based on is that there is no story. There's no meta truth. There's just power dynamics. That has been weighed on the scales of reality and found wanting already, and is over. It's over. I mean, someone who was at the Democratic Convention described the scene there and the distinct lack of beauty, the distinct lack of a vision, the distinct lack of anything approaching a positive future. And, everybody's just walking around wishing they could put a gun in their mouth. It was, and I think that whole scene is already over. I mean, we're looking at the carcasses burning on the fire, on the embers of that whole framework.
Yeah.
And I'm glad. I mean, it needed to go. And anything on a long enough time scale, anything that's not aligned to reality will eventually go away. And the postmodern woke experiment, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's over. And so, I mean, there's other challenges that we face, but I don't think that the woke postmodernism is really one of them. I think, I probably won't waste a lot of breath talking about them because, in a sense, I think they've already lost. Some of them just don't even know it yet. But I mean, the media, you can say that about the media. You can say that about, just the impact that they have, the lack of impact that they have on the culture. People don't trust them, that whole that whole thing's goose. That's a goose that's cooked. God bless the fact that it is. That's amazing. I'm grateful for that. But I do think that we who are advocating for a different path through life, one of the things that we can do is seek to do the hard work of restoring Eden, the practical, work of bringing the kingdom of heaven forward in our life, in our marriages, in our families, and in our businesses, in our communities, in our homes, in our, in the artwork that we surround ourselves with, and the music that we enjoy, and the intimacy that we create with our wife, and all of that we live a kind of story that is profoundly beautiful in a way. Like, that's the way to bring beauty back, is to be beautiful.
Exactly.
Bring back beauty. Yep. And, so that's my challenge, I think, for myself, is what in your life isn't beautiful? What's a burning sack of shit, and what needs to go, and what is actually, has good, strong foundations and can be built into something really beautiful. So that's what inspires me and gets me out of bed.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, because if it's going to change, it's going to have to change from the bottom up. This is not something 100%. You can force from the top down. And the good thing about beauty is it has truth on its side. And so you can really, the best thing that you can do is sort of bring as much into your own world as you can. And then it catches fire from there.
I think we probably have to put it on hold for another conversation, but the conversation about beauty and sensuality, I know we're going to have some Christian listeners who have fear, and maybe even some guys who are struggling with pornography and are struggling to understand how they can build a healthy appreciation for beauty, sensuality, without, having this kind of shame monster rear its head that there's all wrapped up in. That's probably a whole conversation that we could have here on the Metal and Forge show sometime. So I know.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what you do at Good King, so they can reach out to you there too if they want to, help directly with that.
That's one of the things we work on. But please, guys, if you're listening and you have thoughts about that, go to mettleandforge.com. It's METTLE, mettleandforge.com. There's a contact form there, and there's actually a field there where you can submit questions and comments and suggestions for the show. So we would love if you would go do that. We'd love if you would subscribe on YouTube. We might be up to half a dozen subscribers now, Kent. I haven't looked yet.
We're up to 14. Someone took that 14th slot last week, baby. And so now instead of 13 subscribers, we're at 14.
14. Okay. Well, be number 15. And you can access Metal and Forge wherever you access your podcasts on the audio side, but you can watch it on YouTube or Spotify. This is episode 9. Kent, I think I'm about talked out for tonight, but I want to give you a chance to share anything that you'd like to share.
Nope, I'm good. Let's wrap it up, baby. This was fun, man. Great job.
All right, good talk. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening, guys. Subscribe and share with anybody that you think might enjoy this show. Conversation about, help me out, Kent. I don't have my notes in front of me, and I haven't memorized it. It's Manhood, Entrepreneurship, American Life, and Matters of the Soul.
Boom.
There we go.
You got it.
Okay, we hit all 4 of those tonight, I think.
Yeah, kind of. Sure.
Good talk. A little bit light on the
talk.
entrepreneurship maybe, but
yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, it's good to see you again.
All right. See you, man. Love you, brother.
See ya. I love you too.